This is the Daily Roundup on Radio Islam International.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. If you just joined us, you're listening to the Daily Roundup right here from the city of Durban. Quick shower just after Maghrib Salah. Alhamdulillah. Welcome relief to the end of a sweltering day here in the east coast of South Africa. But Alhamdulillah, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala grant khair, barakah and afiyah. During the course of the last few days, we have been discussing with participants, not just South African participants, but global participants of the global Sumud flotilla. And whilst the flotilla may not, of course, be on the water any longer, most of the participants having, I'm assuming by now, made their way home, and they're richer for experience, and also at the same time sharing their personal accounts with their families back home. The activism obviously needs to continue. And ceasefire, as what as it may mean it to be, and as welcome as it is, no doubt, alhamdulillah, the reality is that Palestine still remains occupied. The reality is that the rights of millions of Palestinians are still usurped. Throughout the world, for that matter, those that languish in refugee camps, born, third generation born in those circumstances, and therefore the cause of Palestine is as ever fresh as ever. Joining us, participant in the global Sumud flotilla, we had spoken to and got an account last week, as well as a long-time activist for human rights and Palestinian rights. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah, Dr. Zaheera Soomar.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me.
Dr. Zaheera, post global Sumud flotilla, much of the discussion, and of course post ceasefire as well, certainly focuses on keeping up the momentum. Aid seems to be trickling in. There seems to be an exchange of, or rather a receive of not prisoners, but those who have been kidnapped by the IOF for years. An exchange of bodies also at the same time. And one is hopeful that the guns will be silent on Gaza for a while. But activism, no doubt, needs to take place. A cause is far from forgotten. Your thoughts on that, Zaheera, the need to remain focused on Palestine in the days ahead?
Absolutely. I think, if anything, we need to be amplifying and double downing at this moment, right? I think that one thing that we see, or at least something that I felt when I was intercepted, detained, and also imprisoned, is that we all know the level of evil of the Zionist entity. But the thing that interested me the most was the really low level of intellect that these IOF soldiers have. Many of them are indoctrinated and just puppets. And actually, I felt that they were a bit afraid of us. They didn't quite know what to do with us. It's one thing when they come up against what they call jihadists or radicalists, because then they become violent, right? But when they're dealing with non-violent human beings that are your everyday human beings, what we saw was that they quite don't know how to treat us or what to do with us. And I think that scares them a bit, right? And that's your average person, me, you, everybody else in South Africa, everybody else in every other country. There's millions and millions, billions of us. And I think, if anything, we need to rise. We've seen, Italy being on fire, and South Africa needs to be on fire, to be quite frank. This is what we need to do. Now's the time to capitalize on what was gained with the flotilla and the march. And now's the time to double down and to just push more on these efforts, because it's the one way we're going to crumble the Zionist regime.
Zaheera, of course, it's been a few weeks now since the global Sumud flotilla was intercepted and the participants harassed and arrested or kidnapped by the Israeli authorities. And there have been many discussions around the flotilla, not just the global Sumud flotilla, but previous ones, and who knows, ones that are to come in the days ahead. Words that have been bandied around, that such type of flotillas or such type of initiatives are provocative, or they are political, or the people on board are there simply to ratchet up followers on YouTube or Instagram and to gain some sort of an influencer experience. mean, I know that these type of discussions and these type of comments are going to come out, but responding to them, how does it put you in a position to say that, you know what, we are really activists, we are not there to provoke anybody, we are here to deliver aid?
Yeah, I mean, firstly, let me say that a mission like this is a grassroots mission. It is by no means perfect, and it's by no means designed to be perfect, and it's never going to be perfect, right? A mission like this, if we want it to be perfect, will take us 3 to 4 years to put together. And that means even just having the most sound boats, the most sound people to make sure that every single T is crossed and I is dotted, and that every single person's intention is checked and trained, etc., so that everything looks perfect, comes across as perfect, and maybe is even successful in its nature in terms of what it's intended. But if we wait 3 to 4 years and plan this out, there is no Gaza left at the rate that the Zionist entity is going. So one thing I think people need to understand is this is a grassroots effort. It is never going to be perfect. It was not designed to be perfect, and not all the T's were crossed and not all the I's were dotted, and that was never going to be the intention. So if it comes across as looking as haphazard, not completely perfect, a few mistakes, that was always going to be that way. As a participant, I knew that, and I saw the many, 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 many flaws in the 2 weeks that I was in Tunis, about the potential risks that were not thought through, about the T's that were not crossed, about the I's that were not dotted. And some people did decide that they were not willing to take that risk. Some people decided to double down and stay on the mission despite that. But that's the nature of grassroots. That's the nature of activism. I mean, I've been in this space for 10 plus years, and I know that you can perfect some things, and it's never going to be completely perfect. With regards to who goes on board, I want to be completely honest and say, I don't know that everybody was there for the right reasons. And I might get flack for saying this, but how do you vet every single person's intention and make sure that they're there for the right reasons? We just don't have the time and the capacity. We are also dealing with human beings, and us human beings have black dots on our hearts, if I can put it that way. We are not perfect. Even activists, we are not perfect. We're not heroes. We're not free of sin. We're not free of wrongdoing. We make mistakes, right? So maybe there are 1 or 2 people that came on the board because they do want to get likes and follows. Is that possible? Absolutely. Absolutely. And you might have seen it playing out on social media. But for the majority of people, the 99%, they are there for the right reasons. Okay? They are there to break the illegal siege. They are there for a nonviolent mission. They do take it seriously, and they do take their training seriously. We saw along the mission, many people dropped out at the different ports, Italy and also Greece. Some of them feared for their lives. Some of them got really sick. We did lose people along the way. And we did lose people who maybe realized, oh shit, what is this really about versus what I thought it's about. So that's not uncommon. Is it strange? No, it's probably expected. Did everybody have completely 100% true intentions? Maybe some people faltered. Maybe they did feel like they can make, especially journalists. This is their nature. It's their profession, right? It might come across as them wanting to just do more journalism on this. It is what it is, right? So for the majority of the people, this was not about likes and follows. This was not a selfie yacht. This was not a holiday. I can tell you, I'm someone who does typically hard things. I climb mountains. I put myself in difficult situations. I work in very male-dominated areas. People generally say that I'm a pretty resilient, strong-minded person. But I can tell you unequivocally, this was the hardest thing I've ever done. So for someone to come on here and think it's going to be about likes and follows and gaining a following, even if that was the intention, this was damn hard. It was hard. You risked your life. You risked your safety. You risked your protection. You risked things. We got banned from countries coming out of this. So even if the intention wasn't 100% true, what they went through, what we all went through, what we endured was the same. And it was hard. It was tough. And a lot of people actually felt it quite dramatically and seriously.
When you come to a situation like a post global Sumud flotilla, like where you are in right now, I mean, much of the interviews and much of the interactions that Dr. Zahira yourself and Brother Riaz, who we had spoken to a few days back, and other participants as well, will be towards an audience that is very much so for pro-Palestine, for the cause. Then you will certainly have certain segments of society that have somehow made up their mind with regards to the issue of Palestine. But the majority of, I think, the global audience these days still are very much on the fence, especially in Western countries. How do we view this conflict? How do we, well, it's not a conflict for us, but to them it may be seen as an ancient clash of civilizations. Your interaction or an activist interaction with that segment of the population that are fence sitters, how do you go about gaining such audiences? It's easy. Radio Islam will give you a call, Channel Islam, or those channels who would have called you anyway, even before the global Sumud flotilla, for the purpose of activism. But to gain access to those gray areas of society, how does one go about doing it?
Yeah, I mean, I think the tide is changing. I will say that. And I'll say that it's because of the people that I've come across on this mission as well. Not all people that were part of this mission or that I came across on this mission, or even people that came to Tunis, Barcelona, Italy, and Greece and that supported us on the ground. Not all of these were diehard activists, for the past 10 years. Some of them woke up in the past 18 months, right? Some of them only learned what this was about in the past 18 months. So the tide is changing. People are seeing things differently. People are not only being convinced from a historical perspective. You don't have to have an argument about history for the Palestinian cause right now when it comes to the genocide per se. Maybe when it comes to a solution and the right of return, yes, history really plays an important part, and you do need to understand that, and you do need to bring that into the conversation. But with the current thing of there's a genocide taking place in front of our eyes. There's an illegal siege that is taking place. There's a man-made famine. You can talk about history and you don't have to talk about history because it is very current in terms of we need to get a ceasefire and we need the genocide to stop and we need aid to get in. That's one side of the argument. The other side of the argument is then what happens after that. What does that mean for the people of Palestine? What does that mean for their nation, for their state, for their land, and the right of return? A lot of people that were in my mission in the Global Sumud Flotilla and that were in my cell specifically were not Muslim. I was the only Muslim, right? I was maybe one of the only religiously spiritual people, God-fearing people. There are a lot of people on this mission that are atheists, Buddhists. They don't believe in the same God that I believe in. So one is you can strip it from being a religious conversation, number one. Number two, many people are from Global North and they're white. So it's also just not a brown issue, right? So when it comes to people being appealed to and understanding, it's a simple thing as there are children being killed and bombed on a daily basis. And the argument that the Zionists use about Hamas hiding behind people is logically flawed. You can't tell me that the army that says they're the most sophisticated army in the world has to bomb an entire building to get to one person, and the mass casualties of young children and babies is considered okay. As a person with a brain, a problem-solving brain, a logical thinker, that argument is now flawed, and that's what people are seeing, and that's where the change in view is coming. And so more people are starting to question this excuse or narrative that the Zionist entity is putting forward. And as they open their mind to, maybe there's something here, so they get into the conversation, and so they get into the broader conversation, and maybe even into the history of it. And I've seen those people. I've seen that tide turning. And so, sometimes you don't have to get into the depth of the complexities, as people call it. Sometimes you can just use plain old logic to kind of just have a conversation with the person and appeal to their heart, and also just appeal to them as to what if it was your child? Would you justify it? There's been also one example, really good example that's been used in the US, is that if a shooter comes into a school, can you justify a shooter, which is things that happen constantly, can you justify a shooter shooting an entire school just to get to one person? Because that's a dilemma that the people in the US sit with currently, the mass school shootings. So when you try and make something as relatable to them in an instance that they might be dealing with, you appeal to people's logic and you appeal to people's heart.
Finally, Dr. Zaheera Soomar, when it comes to South Africa's government stance on the state of Israel, well, one, of course, can laud South Africa for the initial stance that has been taken by the ICJ. But in reality, there is a lot of work to do. And there are a number of global examples that South Africa can look toward. I mean, Colombia is a prime example currently. There have been other countries that have also made bold, not just bold statements, but they have put their money where their mouth is. Where would you like to see South Africa in the days ahead when it comes to Palestinian activism?
Yeah, I think a few things on that, and you're absolutely right. We have this reputation of being role models, especially when I got to Tunis and on the boats, everybody was like, oh my gosh, you're South African, you guys are great. And I have this kind of discontentment with it, which is, yes, we did take the Zionist entity to the ICJ, but the very people that did take the Zionist entity to the ICJ are not necessarily in parliament at the moment, number one. Number two, it doesn't make us not complicit. We are still complicit in this genocide. Okay, so a few things do need to happen. At a government level, we need to kick the embassy of Israel out of our country. And we don't need it. We need to cut ties. Colombia has done this. Malaysia has done this. South Africa should do this. Number two, our Glencore supplies coal to Israel. When I was on my boat and the Navy ship was approaching us, at the same time, there was an MSC ship that was going from Johannesburg to Ashdod port to deliver. And it was so hypocritical and so upsetting to just think about it, that as a South African, I'm risking my life, and here we have a ship that's supplying Israel. So we need to be cutting, and we need to be calling for sanctions and cutting ties, economic trade ties, and stopping the coal supply to Israel. That's something that we have to do. And then thirdly, from a public perspective, and I say this to our Muslim community first and foremost, right? We need to be boycotting the Israeli products, like the products that are funding the genocide, funding Israel and supplying weapons and sending money to Israel. Just stop using them. Just stop. I have, for the past few days, been on tour in Johannesburg, in Cape Town, and in Durban. And I have attended functions that were there to bring the flotilla members together to share our experience, but there was Coke products on the table. And I'm disgusted. I'm disgusted that we still have people drinking Coke. That's blood of Palestinians, right? KFC, McDonald's, Nestle. These are the massive companies that are supplying and funding Israel with weapons and with money. As public people in South Africa, as citizens, we need to just stop. We need to stop. It's not a difficult thing to do. So until we have those three things, and there's many more things we can do, but until we have the embassy out, the coal supply stoppage, and we boycotting, right? We are complicit. We are complicit.
Dr. Zaheera Soomar, shukran jazakumullah khairan for joining us on Radio Islam International with the conversation. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Minute and a half it is before 7.